Hello, thank you all for joining us. My name is Andrea Kalyn. I'm the president of NEC, and we'd like to welcome you to the continuation of our NEC Summer Series. I'm really delighted today to be joined by three members of our faculty. We have Bradley Williams, who is the chair of Voice. He's been at NEC since 2012. Erica Washburn, who's the director of choral activities, and actually is the longevity on this panel, right? Having been in NEC since 2009. You're the sage voice of wisdom, Erica. And Josh Major, the chair of opera studies, also here since 2012. We have nice symmetry here. I like that. So thank you to you all for joining me for this conversation. Voice, it seems, has been such an important and key part of the conversations of COVID, I think, right from the very beginning when we started this. And so, and of course, we've been getting new information and learning a lot about voice and the challenges and the opportunities inherent in that. And so I'm wondering if maybe you could talk a little bit about what your work with students has looked like during, the last few weeks of the semester, and how that sort of evolved over that time. Erica, you're on my screen first, so I'm going to start with you because we actually had it right at the very beginning, as there was a choral concert right just the week before shutdown.
We did. We basically closed our season with the Haydn creation, which was a wonderful experience. And I think the most incredible thing about that experience was being backstage when it ended and watching both the chorus and the orchestra come off stage, and the students were just so overwhelmed and so proud of what they had done. It was really something very, very special. And I'm also so glad that is up on YouTube so that anyone can watch it should they want to do that. So if you haven't watched it, you should all go watch it.
It was a really special concert. It was really wonderful.
There was definitely some thinking that we had to do out of the box. We definitely weren't ready to go the virtual choir route. The ensembles are just too big at NEC. The concert choir and chamber singers, when they're combined this semester, the end of the spring semester, was about 115 to 125 students. So to try and accomplish a virtual choir recording would have taken probably around 30 hours or so of editing, not to mention weeks of gathering the recordings and getting the students ready. And we only had 5 weeks at the end of the semester to finish out. So that just really wasn't an option for us. So what I elected to do was, I scoured and looked for videos and other interesting topics that I thought the students would enjoy. And with the help of my grad students, we put together this Q&A series of documentaries and whatnot that the students could watch. We also had to find some that our students in China were able to watch as well and participate with. And so that was an interesting project for them to finish out on. And many of them responded saying that they actually really enjoyed it and learned new things, which was great. The conducting aspect was a bit more of a challenge. I'm very proud of my students in that class, however. They learned very quickly that the up close and personal video recording that we often do when we have these Zoom meetings really wouldn't work because wingspan can't get captured in that way when you conduct. So I was so impressed with the fact that they were creating towers essentially in their apartments to set up their cameras to be back far enough away. They were finding recordings. They were doing really, really interesting things. So I say that they came through with flying colors. They all passed, and I think that they all learned something in the meantime.
That's really great. Yeah, so it's finding sort of the ancillary learning, right, around what we do, which is interesting because those things you just take for granted as not things you have to think about. It's interesting, a different stage. Bradley, you're dealing with singers doing all kinds of things. How did your work evolve and sort of shift over that semester?
Well, the first thing that we all had to get used to was the rhythm that comes with the delay of the technology. And you can watch television and see the news commentators still struggle with the delay between speaking with their guests. So one of my hopes to come out of this is that people will be more polite and not interrupt one once we get on the other side of this, because you have to slow down and wait for the other person to finish. There were several challenges. So I'll go through the negative side. The challenges were the difference between internet signal strength. I had a pretty dependable signal at my home, but some of the students, some were in quarantine for 2 weeks in a confined hotel, and I mean, I can give you a lot of different examples, but that was a primary one, is the unreliable signal, and so calls would get dropped and we'd have to reconnect. There were also disparities in the access to technology. Some people were doing the sessions on old iPads or old computers. Some were doing them on their phone. And another challenge was the location that the students were confined to. Some walked into a closet to try to have a lesson with their phone. Another one was in a laundry room, and others had to limit or basically not have lessons because of the noise restrictions on their apartment lease. And a couple of them were down to the last warning before they would be kicked out. So that was my experience. And also for me personally, to adapt to a different kind of fatigue from talking at somebody across the computer screen, and then knowing that basically they were going to have to sing on a cappella and I would roll a chord. So that's mostly a rhythm thing. The delay is a big rhythmic challenge. So that's what I went through, and I'm still teaching. I'm seeing all my people this week, and I'm noticing that the same challenges exist for some students. It comes down to that internet signal and the speed of the computers.
Right. So we're going to come back to the technology as well as the collaborative aspect in just a moment. I'm going to put a pin in that for a second. And Josh, you know, again, so speaking of collaborative, you've got a theatrical mode, and so how did you navigate that, and your students navigate that?
I discovered a lot of good things, actually, and I discovered some positive application of the medium within the discipline that made it actually quite interesting and quite effective. I'm finding it interesting. I'm finding right now I'm far more intimidated by preparing for the fall than I was in the spring. And I think the spring, we didn't have time to think about it. We just had to respond to the situation. You know, like Erica, we were 2 weeks into La Callisto rehearsals, our big spring production, had to cancel it. We held sort of an in-house run-through of where the singers were at. It was very emotional. And then we came back for the final 5 weeks and found that we just had to simply focus on different things. And that was the positive part. Coaching's online, and as Bradley mentioned, there was a lot of disparity in the internet that people had. You know, it wasn't an equitable situation for students, but it allowed us to focus on diction, language, interpretive issues that can be talked about, if you like. And this was a positive thing. It gave us a chance to focus on these things without the pressure of performance. I found the hardest thing for me as a practitioner, you know, I do performance class. I'm not a lecturer. I'm not an academic in that way, was to come up with projects that were going to be substantive in a more academic way, because it was impossible to do a performance class online at that point. I think we found a way around that for the fall, but at that point it was impossible. And I sort of surprised myself. I enjoyed the challenge of coming up with something that was going to capture the interest of the students. And it's actually a project that I'm going to continue using in the coming years. And I thought that was a nice thing to discover. You know, one thing that occurs to me is that we're using this media now, this digital platforms, and we as teachers, we have to learn but the people we're teaching, they're far more intuitive and understanding of this medium we're dealing with. And so in a way, the students are ahead of us. They understand what this media can do, and we're in order to imagine what we can teach, we need to know what this media does. And we almost have to rely on them to tell us what we can do because it's far more intuitive to them. But there is a certain amount of enjoyment in learning something new, no question about it.
And one other thing I forgot to mention, the positive thing that I learned during the weeks after spring break was that, one, all of the students were well rested, and two, was very interesting is that all of the things that we had been working on technically were noticeably settling and improving. There was no regression, and I was very excited about that. And one student was especially excited, and it was what he said was very interesting, that he felt comfortable because he wasn't constantly comparing himself to his colleagues who he was hearing all the time in studio class. And for some, I think that has been a help, but I can say that not one of them has regressed.
I would jump on Bradley's train right there too, just to say the same thing. I noticed that with my conducting students. I rather than them perform live in our class, I had them pre-record and then send in, and I would watch their videos and provide feedback. And I think what I really enjoyed about that was that I think they felt a certain sense of freedom in their gesture that they didn't always experience when they were in physical class or in front of the ensembles that they worked with. Partly because I think a lot of it was because as their teacher, I wasn't there inspecting every physical move that they make and how it interprets. And so gesturally, there was much more freedom across their entire body, which I thought was amazing. And I talked with them often about that, and they grew into that more as the weeks progressed, which was a wonderful thing to see.
Yeah, that's fascinating. I've heard similar comments from colleagues as well, where there's being in your own home, somehow there's a freedom, there's like a confidence, there's a comfort. So there is that, which brings a thing on. I hope we can bring that confidence back into the in-person work, right? It's going to be a little bit odd. So a couple of things strike me about the fall that have come out of the things that you've said. One, just as we look towards the future, we all, I think, realize the world has changed. And what's interesting, I think, is that, often in education, we're thinking about preparing our students for a professional path, and the profession is here. We're imagining a future because we deal in futures, but the world is still here. And now everybody's kind of at the same starting line, right? Where everything's changed. Much of the professional world is on pause, just, hopefully very momentarily, but feels like a long time, but momentarily whilst we figure out a treatment and a vaccine. And so I'm curious about what your thoughts are about, professional preparation. Online is clearly a stage now. You sort of alluded to that, Josh. And so how that will change the way you do your work with students, even beyond, once we get back to, even beyond this sort of extended COVID management period. How is this changing how you think about preparation, and both the way that you do it and sort of what you do, I guess?
Well, I can go. I don't think the digital world is going to replace the live world. I think it's going to be absorbed into production. And I do think it's incumbent upon us to equip singers with knowledge on how to be successful with this medium. But I don't think it's going to replace something else. I think it's going to become part of it. And then I feel like we have double duty. We have to help students understand how to do well on the screen, but also we still have to focus on their ability to perform live well. So I do think for the next few years, the industry's moving to remote auditions, for example, this year. And so I think we need to then support a student's ability to prepare for those auditions. And we're going to move, for example, in the opera department, we're going to move our classes online, basically, so that the idea, the setup we're looking at now is that a singer will be in the black box singing to a camera. The rest of us will be in a classroom watching the singer on screen and responding in the moment to what they're doing, so then we can communicate with the singer and help them understand how to be more effective. And I think it's important that we do our best to make sure there's some live singing. And so this is sort of how we're approaching the fall at this point. You know, the information changes by the hour practically, so we're constantly shifting and adjusting our thinking a little bit. But that's the kind of setup we're looking at in order to support the singer's ability to function in this environment.
Right. So inherent in that idea is the notion that when you do perform online, it's again like a different stage, right? So I think Bradley, you mentioned this, or maybe it was Erica, sorry, you know, where it's like not just taking what you did on the Jordan Hall stage or in a studio, but kind of thinking about it in this different platform. I'm curious how, if your students are aware of that, are they thinking about that, or how they're helping, or you're helping them understand that, or they're helping you?
It's actually something that they need to be taught in a way. And I think the big difference is that when you're live on stage, the energy you project is forward. It's out to an audience. It's into a theater. And when you're with a camera, it's a much more internal experience, and your energy is focused inward. And the camera is going to bring us into that world. So I think it's a matter of redirecting energy as a technical way to adjust. Which is something we'll work on this fall. I'm not sure, Brad, Erica, your thoughts on this?
Well, I found that in the lesson experience, and some of them had recitals that they were not able to perform, and they did a complete performance for me with, you know, karaoke style in the last lesson. So there were some that were more naturally adapting to being expressive towards the computer screen, and I think that that's a skill that we absolutely have to develop for their audition videos, and how to place the camera, and what the people that hear them want to see and hear, and the right things to capture. So I think there's a lot to be learned, that we knew they were all going to have an internet presence before this happened. They're all going to need a website. They're all going to need good videos, and they can't hide when a camera is on them. So it's going to, like Josh said, it's going to play into them having to be honest in the way they express the text facially, not just with their voice. So I think that is going to be beneficial, to be able to concentrate on this really specialized skill set that singers often don't get.
Yeah, I think I agree with all those things. I think it's a little bit different in the choral world, in the sense that, you know, millions of people all over the world are part of a choir of some sort, whether that's amateur to professional, whatever the age. And one of the primary reasons that people do that and they want to participate in that is because of the social supportive aspect of being in a room with others and communing with them, essentially, through music, no matter what the repertoire is. It's connective in that way. And so there is no question that among the national and international choral community, there is still very much a present sense of mourning. Particularly as now we're starting to see a lot of schools come out with their plans for the fall, you know, public schools that aren't making any attempt at all to have any kind of music in their schools. In fact, they're taking their music faculty and they're redirecting them and shifting them into teaching history, or into watching over a study hall, or something. So it's hard to find the balance, I think, for those of us in the choral community, because the social interaction is so much a part of what we do, not just the musical interaction. But for those that are able, and you know, there are so many conductors right now that are frantically trying to learn the software of how do I make a virtual choir happen. I am in that boat, and I am doing my own research. We're lucky that at NEC we have an amazing team of audio and visual engineers who will help us with all those things when we need them, if we need them. But it's also a skill set that I need to have. but there are some that also don't have that opportunity. And so some people really are out there just feeling lost right now. And it hurts my heart to think about. I think that I'm very happy at NEC that we're trying to take those steps to move forward and to bring choral music back in an incredibly safe way. It's a wonderful thing. And I think that a lot of people are going to be looking to us to see how we do that and how well we adapt to this new style. 16 to 20 feet apart, that's a huge distance. Josh, I'm sure can also imagine, and Bradley, when you're working with another singer or you're working with your collaborative pianist, you're no more than 3 to 4 feet apart. You can hear each other breathe. You can feel it. 16 to 20 is a little bit different story. All of the students, their senses are going to have to be so much more heightened and so much more aware of not just their physical surrounding, but also acoustically what their surrounding is, and visually. They're going to have to be watching in a way that they've never really had to do before. So I think that there's a lot of new, really wonderful learning opportunities that are going to come out of this, not just the technological side of things, but also growth as a musician as a whole, and learning to be more independent, but also releasing some of that independence and learning to trust your colleagues in a very different way that they've not yet had to.
Yeah, I'm mindful that, this is a big conversation even amongst chamber musicians as well, right? So the layering approach. So there's the kind of dispersed, performances, and then the kind of layering approach where the whole approach to listening is entirely different. And so as we move into the fall and we're able to be together at this point, in very distanced, safe, and very careful ways, very mindful that we're not back to our new normal yet. We're not at our new normal yet. We're still in transition. I'm curious about how you're thinking about how you'll be developing those skills. And Bradley, to go back to the collaboration idea of pianist and singer, did you see the sort of listening change and develop? And are you thinking about that differently for the fall, even because there'll still be some spatial differences there too, right?
Yeah, I'm not exactly sure what it's going to look like. I'm kind of waiting to hear. I just know that our in-person experience is going to be in a bigger space. So I assume the pianist will be at one end of whatever that room is, and the singer would be at the other end, and I would be somewhere in the middle. But the fact that we're in real time together should not. I don't see that as a problem, because I'll just raise my arm up, and I do that anyway when I'm teaching to just move things along faster. So there's just a lot of ifs. So it's kind of wait and see, kind of find out when you walk in.
I think it's going to test our oral skills. I mean, I think that's.
I don't think anything has tested my oral skills more than having to teach them online because there's, even with the best signal and when they seem to have a quality mic, they're still part of the harmonic series that just is not captured. And it's doable when you're very familiar with the student's voice and what you're working with. But I did a consult lesson yesterday with a person who wants to apply for the graduate program here from China at 9 o'clock in the morning, 9 p.m. there. And, it was a challenge. And we had a translator, so that slowed it down a bit. But it can be done, It's not ideal, and I cannot wait to be in the same room with a singer live again, so I can really hear their sound.
I'm really excited about it. Some people ask me and they're like, aren't you sad? And I'm like, no, actually, I'm kind of the opposite. I'm really excited about the ways in which we all as faculty and all of our students are going to be challenged in this coming year, because I think that there is such a huge spectrum of growth that has the opportunity to occur. And I think that I know all of us as faculty are ready to jump on board and to go for it. And I think that the students are too. They want to be back. They want to be together. They want to do these things. And so I just I can't help but smile when I think about the fall. You know, I'm not panicking, really trying not to.
Yeah.
But
I agree with you, Erica. One of the challenges, and I think it's beyond just our departments, but for the school itself, is how to continue fostering a sense of community when we're by ourselves so much of the time, or we're just on a screen. And I think that's a big challenge. And I found, I don't know, Erica, in the spring, I had the best attendance ever when I had my Zoom classes. And I thought that,
right?
but I actually thought that was very significant because to me, it reflected a deep, deep desire for people to be a community, to be part of the community. And the only way we could do it was this way, as we are now. And I thought that was sort of profound, the need to be connected, and that the only way we could do it was digitally. And what I found sometimes, we'd finish a class and nobody wanted to hang up. They all wanted to hang out because otherwise they're by themselves in a room. And I see that as a challenge in general for us as we go into the year. And in fact, one of the things I've insisting that our movement class, for example, is online, because it's the only opportunity our students are going to have to be with each other as a class, as a graduate class. It's the only opportunity. Otherwise, when we're in person, there'll be few of us in a classroom, etc. So I don't know, Andrea, how you feel about that, if that's something that's of concern. But I think choir actually is important for that reason too, just to foster a sense of community. Orchestra, I think that's super important.
Yeah, the community piece of it is so huge. You know, I think everybody thinks about musicians as spending long periods of time alone in small rooms practicing, and of course that happens. But so much of our work is together, is collaborative. It's inherently so, and so that piece of it, that connection, is just so important. So I'm looking forward to that as well. But I think this fall, I also am excited about it, Erica, I will say. That's, no, because, I think we're in phases with this. The last few weeks of the semester was an emergency, and it was the most extreme version. No one had the technology. We didn't, individually and collectively. It happened very quickly. Even though we had a sense of things were coming and we were planning, but it was very abrupt, and it was changing very, very quickly in real time. And so there was the emotional impact of that as well as the very tangible physical impact of it. Now going into the fall, we're still in a period that is not, it's still dynamic, it's still changing, and it's not going to be consistent or ideal perhaps, but we have more knowledge, more control, and a little bit more time for preparation. And I'm curious, I think the fall is a chance for us to think about, to have a kind of really hybrid experience, and to also learn in a more productive way what is valuable going forward. What are the things that we can do? What are the things that we learned from this? Whether that's how we might do things a little bit differently, or new stages that we're now able to perform on and help our students perform on well at the same highest level. But also whether that's just listening more deeply, or appreciating the connection of performing together. We will not take those things for granted for a very long time. So I'm excited about the chance to kind of play around with both, to move one step more out of extreme mode. And as we do that, I guess, technologically, are there ways in which you're guiding your students, or things that your students, just need, that a professional musician or an aspiring professional musician just sort of needs to have now in this new world? How are you thinking about technology? And I know, members of your department too have been playing a lot around with the technology in terms of low latency and different kinds of, Erica, you've been talking about the research you've been doing as well. So curious about how you're thinking about our technological setup for success.
A good microphone and a good internet connection. I mean, I think
that'll solve a lot of the world's problems right there.
And the low latency, the low through sound jack. It looks like that's what we're settling in. We can't really bring that up without mentioning the exceptional work that Dr. Ian Howell has done. He's been our John the Baptist for spreading the good word of collaborative, in sync online experience. And I keep telling him somebody's going to name a building after him someday from all this. But he's impacted the whole nation. That's a key component to get closer to what the live experience is like if we're not able to be in the same room. Other things that Ian says about the technology is to have a computer that's no more than 3 to 5 years old. I can tell one thing I'm learning this week is we just recently increased our internet package at home from 300 megabytes per second up to a gig per second. And I've not had one, even if their signal was a bit weak, I've not had one lesson that locked up and disconnected since we started using that. So that is a factor, and that's a fairly easy fix for people on either side, is to just have a higher capacity of the internet. Ian is advocating for external interface, Ethernet direct wall connection for everything to get the most realistic sound. And I'm not hooked up with it yet. I keep thinking that it's going to evolve and change a little bit, but I think that their decisions are kind of settling. And if I'm not mistaken, I think that NEC is going to put out information, kind of a general package recommendation of minimum technology that everybody should have. And I think that'll be essential for it to go well. We've noticed in this meeting that Erica's signal has frozen a few times in a very Shatner-esque kind of way. And so you can imagine that if that was happening in a lesson and they're singing a note and they're going, and then they resolve.
It could be good if it's a good note. It's what everybody will do to keep a good note.
Yeah, but I tell you what, it always happens on the high note. It always happens.
Never on the most. Yeah. Well, so I mean, that's also the internet. The internet connection is just such an equity issue. We've realized that is just depends on your region and urban versus rural and access and all sorts of things. And so, I think I became newly aware of just the disparities, even in my own apartment. And I'm looking forward to that in the fall, because at least we will have, students can be in the building. They'll have access to a more stable internet and access to microphones and things like that. So even if we need to be in separate rooms, as you're describing, Josh, we will be able to have those kinds of experiences. I'm just mindful of your time. I really appreciate you taking the time to talk. I was just curious if there's sort of, we've talked about many of the challenges, but again, if you can sort of pull back, post-vaccine, that sort of amazing time that we can all imagine, or, post-treatment, what you kind of see, what you would imagine you might see as the lessons, the kind of opportunities for teaching and learning, the sort of lessons learned from this moment, what you will take forward to grow your teaching, as I know that you do every year anyway.
That's a good question. The only thing I can think of from my perspective of me interacting with them is that I have to, I'm an active listener, but there's just a different rhythm online. And so we're all musicians and we should be able to adapt to the rhythmic change. And I think on the other side of it, when I'm with the singers in person again, I'll probably demonstrate a lot less, because I can't really do that and scream into the computer screen. So I find myself, verbalizing it in a slightly different way, or singing very softly where they can just hear the shape changes in the instrument. So that's what I'll do, because I used to just sing out a lot in the teaching for them to emulate. But beyond that, I look forward to getting to hear the whole voice, and that will be refreshing. And so I will just probably work slightly slower.
Erica?
I've been using some of this time to reset. I mean, we had to, all of the ensembles, we had to completely rethink what we were going to offer in terms of performances for this coming year, regardless. So I actually have been doing a lot of time, and I've been doing some serious research in terms of BIPOC and LGBTQIA composers, and trying to bring more of their works into what we do, particularly within the choral program at NEC, and from outside the program when I'm asked to conduct festivals and things of that nature. And I'm learning so much, and there's incredible rep out there that I am very excited by and want to do more with that. And also, there's been some incredible companies that have been putting out some really great apps for people to learn and work on their music outside of rehearsals or in a digital environment that I think could be easily adapted to be brought back into our post, more normal world. That would be helpful. So I'm looking forward to learning more about those as well.
Great. Josh, any final words?
The other night, I watched Hamilton, and within the first 3 minutes, I actually get emotional. I burst into tears because it made me miss being in the theater so badly. It just made me want to be in the theater with a community watching live. Having said that, I think what I'm going to take from this, I always, as a stage director, I think of all these things in terms of storytelling and how this medium can help support storytelling and through music, essentially, and how we can incorporate that into the live experience, how we can support the live experience with the medium. But bottom line is, I just miss being in a room with other human beings,
Well, music is deeply humanistic. It's absolutely core to who we are as people in the world. And I know we all look forward to really being able to have the full dimension of that when we return. So thank you for what you've done to make it possible for our students and for our school to continue the work and to be able to maintain that connection, even in a virtual world, and also for just really highlighting the importance of adapting and growing, but also of recognizing the real value in the work that we do. So thank you very much. We're deeply grateful to you all.
Thank you.